So as an adoptee, were there boundaries you needed to set or things you needed to say no to throughout your discovery process or even after that, or even as a child? Were there boundaries you set to kind of, I don't know, protect yourself, or if people were nosy with questions, like in school, or are there boundaries you set throughout your life relating to adoption?
A lot of adoptees do. For me, that wasn't what fit as much. So like I mentioned, I had flaming red hair, and people would literally stop my mom and I on the street when I was
So nosy.
4 or 5 years old.
So nosy.
And
What?
say, oh, where'd she get her red hair? I have a niece. These would be like, little old ladies. And, I have a niece that has red hair like that. Where'd she get her red hair? And I would proudly say, I'm adopted. And they would be, like, oh my God.
They didn't know how to answer that.
As if I'd announced, I'm a bastard child. But, I just, like, to me, that was the honest answer. And I was, so probably I had a lack of boundary. I wasn't trying to do it to be shocking, but I did notice, like, okay.
Your family's never taught you it was a bad thing. So why would you think it would be?
Yeah.
Right?
Although I did also notice that my mom would often answer, oh, there's sandy hair in the family, or we have some Irish heritage, which, was
just
covering
to
it
shut
up.
it down.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like, well, that's not the honest answer, but I do know adoptees who don't want their friends or their teachers or different people to know, they want to keep control of the message. I think one boundary for me, and I think I kind of mentioned this, but when I was searching, I wanted to do it myself. I knew that there were people out there that I could just hand over a couple thousand, not that I even had a couple $1,000s at that stage of my life. I was in my early 20s, but that I could just pay to do this. But for me, that was putting my life back together. And so I firmly rejected outside help. It was a really therapeutic year for me to have control of that.
The discovery process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was a boundary of, or even like my dad really suggesting, he wanted the minister of our church to find the minister of a church in Milwaukee where my birth mother lived to find a social worker who could contact her. And it was like, no.
That's a lot of layers.
Yeah.
That's a lot of layers.
And he meant well, but
yeah,
it was
sure.
like, that's not, this is between me and her.
Yeah. It's a very personal, intimate thing.
And if somebody's going to hear her voice, I want
right?
it to be me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so,
yeah. I think it brings it full circle. Giving birth to a child is very personal, very intimate.
Yeah.
And then that reunion.
It was my way
you
of
made it
honoring
just as
her,
intimate. Yeah.
Honoring her place. And
yeah.
So I guess that was part of what, and I was really close with my dad. I didn't reject his suggestions.
Sure.
Because I didn't think he was a wise person. It wasn't a fit for what I needed at that moment.
Are there other boundaries that you've heard of other people setting or that people should consider when they're searching for their biological parents?
I think there's a lot of myths out there still. I think a lot of people are held back by, feeling like they're going to hurt people or not knowing where this is going to land. I had a good friend, actually my roommate at the time that I started my search, who I was keeping up to date about my search, and as I got closer to finding, she realized I was actually going to complete this and call this person. She said, well, how far are you going to take this? And I just realized, like, okay, you're not living in my shoes. Like, you're not walking in my shoes. You don't know. Yeah, you don't understand. So I think surrounding yourself with other adoptees finding your community, finding your people who have been through these types of things so that you're understood, truly understood.
Maybe talking to people who've been through it.
Yeah, right. And so that was a huge piece of me starting Adoption Network. I felt misunderstood, and I wanted to find people that understood.
Yeah.
And so finding, I just felt so powerfully like there needs to be a place where people can come together and talk about these things. As an adoptee, I'd never heard a birth parent speak about being a birth parent. And, so like if you even think about it, you said those birth parents, but for the most part, we all know a lot of adoptees. We all know a lot of adoptive parents.
It's very mysterious.
And for every adoptee, there are 2 birth parents out there, but we almost never know who they are.
Yeah.
And so, finding ways to combat that isolation, I think, is huge.
Yeah.